Hi everyone, my name is Kirk Rojas and today we'll be reviewing chapters 19 through 23 of Signorelli StoryBranding 2.0. Next slide. So chapter 19 talks about testing, and at this point we should understand the brand's inner and outer layers and the prospect's inner and outer layers, and advertisers are going to be doing research to try and figure out the best way to communicate the brand story to the prospect. One of the biggest misconceptions is that message sent is the same as message received, and we know that's not always true based on verbals, nonverbals, and other factors. And understand that research should only be used as just an aid or an input into the judgment and decisions made about communicating the brand story. One of the ways that the book talks about conducting research is through focus groups, but understand that there's flaws to focus groups. You can get unreliable answers, invalid conclusions, and small sample sizes. It's one of those things where the group could be like 5 or 100, and you're trying to speak for thousands, and that small sample size, especially if they're from the same area or they're part of the same culture, can give you not the clearest picture of everybody that could be a consumer for the product. You might get unreliable answers or invalid conclusions because the way the question is set up and the answers that they're able to give don't always give the most reliable answers. An example is if you're telling somebody to pick between two possible answers, it could sway them because one day they could feel one way and the next day they could feel a different way and give you a different answer. So the book continues to talk about resonance development testing, and this is a way to figure out how the brand best relates to the prospects. We talked about I am statements and the unique value proposition, and what we're trying to do here is match the I am statements of the brand with the I am statements of the prospect, trying to see which ones resonate most between the two. So you have Nike, which says, we create winning products for winning athletes. And then you have the prospect, which says, I want the best products to be a winning athlete. That is considered high resonance between the brand and the prospect. Next slide. So chapter 20 talks about big T versus small t truth. Understand that truth is not what is said, but what is believed. And a lot of times the naked truth is hard to stomach. It's hard for us to digest. And that's why we tend to tell the truth in stories. And we'll actually touch on that again in chapter 22. When resonance increases, when that resonance testing is done and you get higher resonance between the brand and the prospect, there's less resistance to what the product or the brand is offering. So small t truths are wrapped around more the outer layer. They're objective. They can be provable, fact or arguable opinion. The example you see here is the #1 selling SUV in the United States. The thing about small t truths is they're not forever. They could change, and competition can easily catch up and surpass that. So you might have the #1 selling SUV now. However, in 6 months or a year, that may no longer be the case, and then you have to keep evolving your small t truths to match your brand. The big T truth, though, is something that's tied to the inner layer, and it's tied to emotion. So it's that truth that you can evoke the emotion from the prospect. The messaging that you use should make the consumer feel understood. They feel like, hey, this brand understands me. Next slide. Chapter 21 talks about the care and feeding of the creative animal. So we're talking about those creative people who then take the story that we're trying to tell and give it a vehicle, I would say, to get it out there for the prospect. And creatives are in charge of communicating the brand, and I say that they need to experience the big T truth behind the message to create successful advertising. So a lot of times we might give them some, simple facts and some simple information, be like, hey, put something together. But the best advertising, if they can experience that big T truth, that emotion behind the product or the brand, then they can go ahead and also develop advertising with that. And then there's, of course, I've seen it in other presentations, but I'll talk about it too, is the best thinking is usually the product of freedom. Um, and that's why not just giving them facts and just information. If you can give them I am statements that they can interpret and don't limit their creativity, then they have a better chance at creating effective communication for the brand and effective visuals for the brand. So then chapter 22 talks about sell the truth. It tells a story about the truth walking into a town, and people just shun the truth. They don't want to talk to the truth. They pretty much outcast the truth. And then a story walks into the town, and the story is loved and welcomed. The story goes out of town, and they see truth just sitting there, and they ask the truth, what's wrong? And he says, nobody wants to hear from me. Nobody likes me. So the story says, hey, where's some of my garb, some of my clothes? And the two of them go back into town together, and the truth is more accepted, right? So the moral of the story, or the point of the story, is truth wrapped in a story is best received or better received. It gives people a chance to make an opinion and figure out the meaning behind it instead of just swallowing the naked truth as they talk about it. Next slide. And then, Signorelli pretty much wraps up the book here. He talks about other ways to use story branding, talking about the personal brand. It's evident that we all have a story to tell. As you can see here, I have my painting, right? And it's my beach, and I've got my home. Things that I can talk about, things that I can share are based on these things, the values and beliefs that we all have. In sales, as a salesperson, try to ensure that you get to know that person's inner and outer layers, ask open-ended questions, and give them a chance to understand what their values and beliefs are, so that, of course, you can then match what you're selling, their brand, your product, to their beliefs and their values. All right. Ensure that you paint pictures when communicating, and instead of just stating facts, because sometimes we get bored with the facts. All right. So next slide. And to wrap it all up, this is how I interpret telling the story. So based on everything we just talked about, you just conduct testing to determine resonance between the brand and prospect. From there, you can go forward and develop a brand story that evokes emotion or big T truth. And then you allow creatives the freedom to communicate the brand story, not limiting their creativity. And then you go forth and tell the brand story. Next slide. Lastly is my question to you all. What are examples of small T and big T truths of your favorite brand? Again, I'm Kirk Rojas. Thank you very much.